Now, the decision of these people to stand up on the behalf of their faith, and that being the Australian National Imams Council, to choose today to be the day where they send the universal condemnation of not just Tony Abbott, but Australia and Western forces for going in and trying to, as we speak, have humanitarian aid, and yep, there are airstrikes as well, to save the people of Iraq, fellow Muslims. But still, I mentioned there was one person who was brave enough to stand up today, and there has been a ridiculous amount of pressure on this guy because of who he is, to somehow constantly have to explain and justify what he believes. But Ed Husic, you know, is Australia's only Islamic Member of Parliament. Ed Husic gave an interview here on Sky News a couple of weeks ago, but that didn't seem enough. So today he stood in the Federal Parliament in a thing called the Federation Chamber, and he said what so many other prominent Islamic leaders should be doing in this country. The entire video is up on our Facebook page, but I think this is the bit that we should be very proud of. I'm very proud of a country that is one that is accepting enough that a kid like Ed Husic can become a member of the Australian Parliament, because his faith means nothing to me about the type of man that he is, but it's the strength that he was willing to say these words publicly that show he is well and truly worthy of being a member of our federal parliament. Have a look.
There is an issue here. There are people that are being seduced by extremism, that are being radicalised and are being tempted to go and enact on this extremism elsewhere. And there is a rightful concern that once they have done and undertaken horrific acts beyond our borders, what happens on their return. We again need to act as one. I am heartened by both the words of the Prime Minister and the opposition leader, that what we are fighting here is extremism. We are not fighting faith, we are fighting extremism. And while we may have differences of opinion on approach on how we do it, I certainly from this point say, in this vantage point, being able to have the honour of representing people in this parliament, say to people that this is not the path to travel down. Extremism is not going to give you the solution or the answers or to help anyone. Extremism is more a recipe for further violence and will also split people further apart at a time where we need to bring people together. The worst thing you can do is to force people into corners where they refuse to engage and refuse to act and refuse to build on that spirit of coexistence I reflected on earlier in my remarks. So we do need to act. And I also, while we again might have difference of opinion on how things are done, if the Prime Minister of this country, regardless of your politics, asks to sit down to sort these problems that confront the community, all I say to people is I urge them to sit and to talk and to respect the fact that the Office of Prime Minister has reached out and is seeking a way to bring people together to fight something that is a common threat to us all, extremism.
If I may quote my very Australian father, hear bloody hear. Ed Husic is exactly the type of person that I want in our federal parliament and exactly the type of person who I want to be part of an Islamic community that is not putting out statements condemning our government on the day that somebody's head is ripped off by extremists. Rather, somebody who is saying we have a problem in this country of people who want to be extremists, who have put their hand up to go and learn the skills and the craft of terrorism. And those people want to come back here. When the Prime Minister wants to meet you, you meet them. More in a sec.
My mum makes underwater fans that are powered by the moon. She makes aeroplane engines that can talk. She makes trains that are friends with trees. My mum works at GE.
If If you want to find great deals on hardware,
go where the tradies go.
Ripper deals for Dad. Hitachi drill and grinder kit, $1.99 for the lot. Stanley twin tapes, just $17. Go where the tradies go. Home timber and hardware.
The mighty Ziegler and Brown Triple Grill. 3 stainless steel burners, 3 different heat zones for greater cooking versatility. It's the complete barbecue system. The award-winning Ziegler and Brown Triple Grill. Choose the Ziggy that's right for you, only at Barbecues Galore.
The world abounds with many delights, magical sights, fanciful flights, and those who dream on beautiful nights dream of beautiful things. The world is full of beautiful things, beautiful people too, beautiful people like you.
The Renault Koleos, where capable Bose audio meets a beautiful leather interior from just $34,990 until the end of October. Or step up to the diesel for just $1,000 more. Hurry in to your local Renault dealership today.
Fungal nail infections can be embarrassing, and whilst other treatments can take 6 to 12 months, Caniston can fast forward your treatment to 2 months or less. Introducing Caniston Fungal Nail Treatment Set. In Phase 1, Caniston removes the infected part of the nail, exposing the fungi on the nail bed. In Phase 2, Caniston treats the fungal nail infection at the source, leaving you with renewed confidence. Fast forward with Caniston.
As we approach middle age, bone loss slowly begins. Vitamin D helps strengthen your bones, and Australia's #1 vitamin D brand is Ostalin. Speak to your GP about Ostalin or check your risk online.
Thanks for watching. How's this for a lineup? Michael Kroger, as always, joining us on a Wednesday from Melbourne. Joining us in Canberra, 2 members of Parliament from both houses. Let's cover it off here. Kelvin Thomson for the Labor Party and Seselja, who is from the Libs.
Good evening, Paul.
Gentlemen, hello.
G'day.
Adam Creighton from the Australian newspaper with me here in the studio. And I should point out the Australian flag that's in the corner here. Please don't read any crazy nationalism into it, apart from this National Flag Day. On this day, 1901, is when the flag flew for the first time. And it's the symbol that I think, regardless of how we could passionately disagree on things, it is the symbol that unites 23 million people, OK? And if you want to change that and there's a vote, fine and fair enough. But till then, that's the thing that holds us together. So happy birthday, Australian flag. About this beheading that took place today, the President spoke in, of all places, Estonia, about this horrible crime today. Have a look.
Like Jim Foley before him, Steve's life stood in sharp contrast to those who murdered him so brutally. They make the absurd claim that they kill in the name of religion, but it was Stephen, his friends say, who deeply loved the Islamic world. His killers try to claim that they defend the oppressed, but it was Stephen who traveled across the Middle East, risking his life to tell the story of Muslim men and women demanding justice and dignity. Whatever these murderers think they'll achieve by killing innocent Americans like Stephen, they have already failed. They failed because, like people around the world, Americans are repulsed by their barbarism. We will not be intimidated. Their horrific acts only unite us as a country and stiffen our resolve to take the fight against these terrorists. And those who make the mistake of harming Americans will learn that we will not forget, and that our reach is long, and that justice will be served.
Kelvin Thomson, I don't think that any reasonable person thinks that this is a war on a particular faith. I think people know that this is a bastardised version of it that's being practised by the most brutal of thugs.
That's exactly right. And of course, in terms of people who Islamic State have been attacking, they've been totally indiscriminate in relation to that. They've attacked the Shias, the Alavis, the Assyrian Christians, Chaldean Christians, the Turkmen, the Yazidi. So totally indiscriminate and totally without justification of any kind.
And the inevitable balance here, Zed, is about how the Western world responds here. The Prime Minister did speak in a vagary today about a call for greater help. We wait, we see, we'll see how that goes from here. But events like this, while they scare us, they do not weaken our resolve to go after these people, because it's not about whether that happens here in Australia. The consequences of that happening there is what we need to punish, apart from anything else.
Look, absolutely. I think this strengthens our resolve and strengthens the resolve of really all Australians, or it should, because what we are seeing here is just unvarnished evil. And if we're looking at a just cause, I can't see how someone could make a case that it is not a just cause to stop the kind of slaughter that we are seeing in this part of the world. So, no, our resolve should be strengthened. These things are shocking. I hope we never become desensitised to this kind of violence, but we do have an absolute responsibility to try and stop this kind of terror and this kind of violence wherever it might take place.
Now, you know, Michael, I was, for my sins, watching Channel 2 a bit earlier this evening, and the way that they decided to censor part of these images was not just to obviously censor the most horrific parts, but also they were blurring out the weapon that was involved here. The New York Post has put out a softer cover than the one they had last time, with not a knife to the throat of the journalist in this moment, but still something very close. It is important that these videos do not lessen the impact as inevitably they come our way. We need to remain as horrified as we were about James Foley, as we are here, and about the inevitability of the next one.
Paul, absolutely. And the more graphic the image, the more impact it has. And let's not fool ourselves. You and I and others on this panel are of the slightly older generation than the young people who can see access to the whole video by getting on the internet and finding where the beheading is, and they can look at that. There was outrage at the Australian published that photo of the child holding the head. Sometimes those things have to be seen for people to understand what is going on in Iraq today and what the West needs to do to stop it, because we haven't seen anything like this for, God, a generation, and it's shocking. It's shocking.
Well, it's that thing where, the true test of the West will be how they get on with this. I mean, Obama, the last time he spoke about this, Adam Creighton literally said he didn't have a plan about Islamic State. That's terrifying to me.
Well, it probably is, but I mean, I'm slightly pessimistic about the long-run situation in the Middle East. I really do think the religion is still racked with internecine divisions, and in some ways it's still a 17th century religion. I mean, sort of Christianity put to one side its internal divisions way back in the 17th century, and I really don't think that Islam has yet, and I don't know whether foreign policy of the United States or even the foreign policy of Australia can actually fix these very major and marked divisions there. I mean, of course, I fully support the humanitarian efforts there, but I do think the Middle East, and especially the other countries in the Middle East, really need to take greater responsibility for this issue, including Iran, of course, and Saudi Arabia.
Now, I'm not going to go around the whole panel here, but fellas in Canberra, you get the hot seat question here. Those Islamic leaders who today decided that today was the day to put out the press release of universal condemnation of Western policy, Tony Abbott. I mean, this is the second time this has happened. Zed, I'll put it to you first. Well-meaning or otherwise, is there a dumber time to put out a statement than on the day somebody is beheaded to have a go at Western foreign policy as being the reason that people like Islamic State exist?
Well, no, there isn't, and I think that it is concerning. It's concerning to me. I'm sure it would be concerning to many of your viewers. Not just the timing, but in fact a lot of the content of that statement. I don't think that somehow trying to, I guess, blame Australia and other countries for this barbarity is the right way to go. These people can't be appeased. They're not going to be appeased by Australia taking a different approach to the region. We do need to remain firm. So I think that not only was the timing misguided, but I think what was actually in that statement was completely wrong.
Kelvin, for you, what jars more for you, the timing or that message that, again, it's not about local factors here, it's about Western, our policy towards these areas?
Well, as I've indicated before, Paul, I completely disagree with the idea that our foreign policy or anyone else's could represent a justification for this kind of violence. As I indicated, they are carrying out this kind of violence on all manner of communities who have all manner of views about different things. So the indiscriminate resort to violence and to terrorist acts in order to intimidate and seek to resolve disputes by force cannot be supported and has generated a humanitarian crisis which the international community has a responsibility to address.
All right, well, lads, let's all get off the unity ticket here, and I want to start talking about superannuation here. If you want to have a view on that or anything else, and the words of Ed Husick, go and check out our Facebook page. Just go searching for Paul Murray Live. This is the back and forth in Parliament today, as we know that the increase in super contributions has been put off for a few more years. The reason it is further down the road is because of the deal Clive Palmer put in place. Now, that's either the only deal that was on the table and therefore it had to be taken, or it was the dirty deal that never should have been touched. I'm sure we'll have different views in a second, but here's the back and forth from Question Time.
The Prime Minister confirmed that for an average income earner, aged 25, that his decision to freeze the superannuation guarantee will cost that person around $100,000 by the time they retire.
Money that would otherwise be squirreled away in superannuation funds will instead be in the pockets of workers.
There'll be silence
it will instead
on my left.
be in the pockets of the workers of Australia.
I must say, Michael Kroger, God love Bill Shorten for firing up and trying to find, the great... he's essentially said, because of this decision, you will have $100,000 to pay off your mortgage before you retire.
Yeah.
Yeah, help me out here.
Well, look, there's never been a spending program that Billy hasn't liked. There's never been a tax that he hasn't liked, and he's sometimes he has good days. He had a very good day, a very good period supporting the government in relation to Iraq. I'd give him big ticks for that. But then he descends back into this cheap politics 101, and people are going to get very, very tired of this. He was asked today by Abbott, if you're so opposed to what we're doing, will you undertake to reinstate the 12% straight away? Will you make that Labor policy right now, announce it right now? And he wouldn't. So all of these cheap schoolboy politics he's going on with, it's going to wear very, very thin. It's going to wear very thin, and he's got to come up with some specific policy of his own very soon because, he's running out of petrol on all these things. It's a pretty cheap base sort of politics he's playing, and it doesn't last.
But Kelvin, of course, at its very heart, it's about the money now or the money when you retire. Now, obviously, the better thing for the system in the longer run is that idea of more money at retirement means less potential pressure on the public purse. But as a political sell, $100,000 now or $100,000 later?
The better thing is that the government keeps its undertakings, and the government said there would be no dodgy deals and that there would be no adverse consequences for superannuation, that people could trust this government to continue with the superannuation announcements and programs of the previous Labor government. It has failed to do this. It has the Liberal Party has never seen superannuation for workers that it wanted to support, and today was no exception for that. And it is going to be to the detriment of ordinary workers in terms of their retirement incomes, in terms of their capacity to provide for themselves in retirement.
Zed, is the real problem for your boss that regardless of the quality of the decision on superannuation, Labor can use it to feed back into the trust question?
Well, look, there's a couple of things going on here. One is obviously the issue of whether to have 9.5% now or 12% soon, or to delay it. And that is fundamentally a question of whether you get that money in your pay packet now or whether it's put into your superannuation for later. That's always been the balance when we look at superannuation. And people can still make those choices. People can still make those choices to put extra money in their super if they like. Alternatively, they can pay down their mortgage. They can pay the bills. They can have a little more money to spend on other things. That is as it should be. The other aspect of this, though, Paul, is the fact that as we were negotiating and as we set about trying to find a way of paying down the debt, getting rid of this bad tax, the mining tax, the only people we could negotiate with was the Palmer Party and the other crossbenchers. We couldn't negotiate with the Labor Party, we couldn't negotiate with the Greens because they simply didn't want to be there. And so what we are doing is finding ways of making savings and getting rid of bad taxes, and that's what any good government should seek to do, particularly when you've got an obstructionist Labor Greens opposition.
All right, Kelvin, what about that idea? It's easy to say no all the time, but of course that means they don't even talk to you, they go straight to Palmer. Should Labor, at least behind the scenes, be more open to the idea of our door is open, talk to us before you have to go over to the loony yellow wing of the Senate?
Well, what we are open to, Paul, is the idea of keeping faith with the people who supported us on the basis of the program that they supported us. So we are keeping faith with our election commitments, and we only wish the government would keep faith with its election commitments, which were no cuts to health, no cuts to education, no cuts to pensions, no increase to student fees, and maintaining the superannuation arrangements. So in these things, the government has no business departing from the things that it took to the election.
All right, I want to ask you here, Adam, as the economics man on all of this. What about this argument? Because PVO earlier here on Sky News was saying that it should be 18%. And 18% means, superannuation means that people have plenty of money for the time they retire. The push on the public purse won't be there. Clearly, however, my view... all right, good. Well, tell us, why is he wrong? Why is he wrong? Why is Labor wrong? That, look, the current system, fine as it is.
Well, look, I mean, firstly, I just want to say it's massively fraudulent of the Labor Party to come out there and to suggest that this money does not come out of workers' wages. I mean, every economist knows that, the Labor Party knows that, everyone knows that. I mean, I would say that super is the greatest fraud I think really in Australian public policy history, because it tricks workers into thinking that the money is coming from their boss when it's actually coming out of their own pocket. That's the first point. I also want to mention that the Henry Review in 2009 strictly advised the Labor government not to increase the superannuation guarantee from 9 to 12 because it said that the cost of the tax concessions from doing that actually far outweigh the reduction in the age pension costs in the future. And so it is not good for the budget in the bottom line. It is 100% bad for the budget in the long term as well.
But isn't the whole thing, though, that even if, I mean, I agree, it comes out of workers' wages, but I thought the whole purpose, and I think Keating is right in saying it's about forced savings. It's about saying we are going to guarantee that that 9% ends up in a fund, in a bank. Yeah.
But I mean, it's, firstly, I would say, why can't the 25-year-old person that Bill Shorten mentioned have the choice to, basically to save or to spend the money now? I mean, he should be able to decide whether having income in his retirement is more important than having income now. I mean, he is best placed to make that decision, not the government. And of course, there is absolutely nothing stopping him now from putting extra money in superannuation, and of course, putting 12% in off his salary if he wants right now. In fact, anyone right now can put 12% of their salary in if they want. There is nothing stopping them from doing that. So really all the government has done is just given workers a lot more freedom to make the choice. And I mean, it's one of the things Henry said was one of the reasons why it's so bad to lift the guarantee is because it's especially bad for low-income workers because, they are basically forced to part with 9% or 12% of their salary, goes into these accounts which they quite naturally pay absolutely no attention to, and they are fleeced relentlessly by the finance sector for a good 40 years, and so they end up with some paltry little amount, $100,000, and they end up on the pension anyway. Well, they end up on the pension.
It's funny you say that because, Kelvin, I've got to say, I think the one bit that is often missing from our superannuation conversation, and some of my mates in the big end of town get ready to kick the TV, is that unlike a bank, this is a sector that can, if there's a downturn, hand you back less than was actually forced by legislation to be put in there. Are you happy with the regulation that we have around the sector and the system to guarantee that for every dollar you were forced to put in there, you get every dollar of it back?
Well, it wasn't dollars that you were forced to put in there. These are employer contributions to superannuation, and I frankly think the view that if the government doesn't lift the superannuation guarantee, employers are going to generously ensure that workers get more in their pay packets is misconceived. In fact, wages are rising at the lowest rate that they have risen for many years. Bill was supporting the increase in the superannuation to guarantee to 12%.
But he acknowledged that
you can make that argument, but I really hope that you realise that you're arguing against every single economist in the country, and indeed the Treasury as well, all state treasuries and the federal Treasury, which assume 100% of the super guarantee is paid by workers. So are you also going to argue that income tax is not paid by workers? Because your employer also pays income tax, right, on your behalf. So does that fall on the workers, or does the boss pay that? Who pays income tax?
The view that employers are going to magnanimously increase workers' pay packets as a consequence of this is fanciful, and the fact that workers now have the superannuation guarantee that they do is good for them and is good for the nation. So I strongly support the superannuation guarantee, and I think it should be lifted to 12%.
All right. Stick around, fellas, because in a second I want to take a quick break and then I want to talk about what's happening in Victoria. Now, all of a sudden, the Victorian government, who was willing to, in part, run the protection racket of Jeff Shaw, is now turning around saying he should be booted. Wow. More in a second.
magical sights, fanciful flights, and those who dream on beautiful nights dream of beautiful things. The world is full of beautiful things, beautiful people too, beautiful people like you.
Are you peckish, hungry, or starving? At Hungry Jack's, with flame grilled beef, cheese and barbecue sauce, you can enjoy a single, double or triple barbecue cheeseburger from $2. Yeah, just $2. The burger's better at Hungry Jack's.
Barbecues galore, spring clean out. Buy this 4-burner barbie with side burner, half price at $3.99. And get this bonus 18-piece toolkit. Tipper settings half price, just $3.99. Pizza ovens half price too, $4.99. Massive spring clean out at Barbecues galore.
So, you're here to talk about business banking. This should be good. What would a bank know about my llama farming business?
Exports to Taiwan.
What?
25 tonnes.
Well-
Comfy slippers. About 4 loads a week. Their hyperallergenic fleece means it's not itchy.
How do you know all this?
It's my job to know, sir.
Fancy a job with a smaller company?
We're making banking easier with people who know your business, not just your banking.
Falcon by Aga, where form meets function. Beautiful cookers with a choice of fuel types, styles and sizes, designed to meet the demands of the modern kitchen. With 184 years of history, now is the time to make Falcon the heart of your home. Purchase any 110cm classic or Elan cooker and save $800. Purchase any 90cm classic or Elan and save $600. For a limited time only. Offer ends October 12. Visit a Winning Appliances store near you. winningappliances.com.au.
Prices are down, down and staying down on even more of your freezer favourites at Coles, like Street's Blue Ribbon Ice Cream, down, down and staying down to just $4.90 every day. And delicious Coles brand mixed berries, plump blueberries and blackberries. Yum! Snap frozen to keep all that delicious goodness in. Down, down and staying down to just $4.50 every day. So to save more on the things you buy every day, get down, down to the freezer aisle at Coles.
Thanks very much for watching. How's this for a super panel that we've got all around the country? We've got all the power in Canberra, people in Melbourne here. It's all happening here. All right, no particular order. That's the Brady Bunch. Everyone be waving. Kelvin Thomson says Seselja. We've got Michael Kroger, Adam Creighton as well. Now, I wanted to ask you here, first to you, none other than Michael Kroger. There's a lot of garbage to go around when it comes to Jeff Shaw, apart from him, the bloke. But we have seen literally a swap in position from opposition leader and premier about whether this bloke should be booted from the parliament or not. Now, Dennis Napthine, who said he shouldn't have been booted from the parliament a couple of months ago, well, he said this to David Spears today here on Sky News.
He's got up in Parliament yesterday and on face value made that apology. But within hours, he was out there saying that that was a farce, he was just going through the motions, he was just going through the hoops, and it was very clear it wasn't a genuine apology, it wasn't an appropriate apology, and he felt no remorse. For that reason, there is no doubt he is in contempt of the Parliament.
So boot him. So, OK, you would imagine that the Labor leader, Daniel Andrews, is up by 10 points in the polls, that he would agree. Get rid of this guy. Well, maybe not. He is talking to David Spears.
We voted for it. Dennis Napthine instead saved Jeff Shaw three months ago when we had grounds. We had safe, legal grounds to expel him. I've had to come to terms with the fact that I lost that vote. I've had to live with the consequences of that. Jeff Shaw's back here. Frankly, I didn't want him here. Dennis Napthine needs to come to terms with the consequences of his actions.
Michael, this is absurd. Please help me call a spade here. Who exactly is the one backing out here? Because this is rather bizarre.
Well, look, they've both changed their positions, but I have to say, and I know that Kelvin will disagree, Dennis Napthine has grounds to change his position. He said give the guy a second chance if he apologises. So he apologised. But then you've just heard what Dennis said. The guy basically then said to the press, didn't really mean it. That was all fast going through. So obviously Napthine said, well, look, if you weren't genuine, your second chance is over. So we're going to move to expel you. And look, Daniel Andrews, who wanted to expel him last time for base political reasons, and I understand that, he's just being a wrecker, he's just trying to cause as much confusion and chaos as possible, said, no, we're now going to keep him. So in my view, Dennis Napthine had absolutely the right and a perfect justification for saying, I've changed my mind because his behaviour's been so bad, and Labor just want to wreck the joint, and that's what oppositions do 2 months before the election.
But Kelvin, help me out here. Is the reason that Napthine has decided to do this now is because there's only a handful of sitting days left? I mean, why this flip here? Because obviously, him saying one thing in the Parliament and another thing in reality, you would have thought that goes off to a Privileges Committee. Instead, no, it's immediate execution.
Well, this Parliament has been a farce and a shambles the whole way through, and Dennis Napthine is in the shadows of the election now thrashing around looking to change tack because his previous approaches have not had the support of the Victorian people, who I think frankly can't wait to put this Parliament out of its misery.
Bloody oath. It's that thing, Zed, where, you've worked at the local level. You were part of the territory politics for a very long time, and thankfully nowhere near it now.
I've seen minor parties and independents holding the cards.
But this is the thing. I mean, we've seen it at the federal level, state level, and territory as well. It is always poison if you, the government, try to cling to power by using one of these people. And it's too little too late, surely now, for the Victorian Liberals to say, now he can get the biscuit, rather than 3 months ago when there wasn't a budget passed and it wasn't 5 minutes to midnight.
Well, I think when you rely on, I guess loose cannon independence, for want of a better term, for supply, it does become very challenging. I mean, I think one of the reasons I'm not Chief Minister is because I refuse to have a Green in my cabinet. I refuse to give him $1 billion light rail. But that's in Canberra. The issues in Victoria are different, but I think it's always particularly disappointing when we see someone who was elected on a party platform then become an independent and hold a government to ransom. That is difficult. But that said, the Labor Party has not helped the standing of the Parliament by the way they have conducted themselves in opposition, and I think Daniel Andrews flip-flopping on this one is just the latest example of that.
All right, gents, last one I want to ask both of you, and then we'll move on to some other things here. Today is the 75th anniversary of when Menzies made that incredible speech that because Britain was at war, we were as well. Zed, for you, I mean, it is a pretty easy thing to say, but about that greatest generation, but I think any of us with family connections to it know it, about how important that World War II generation was. The lessons of World War II, they're multiple, but is there a particular battle? Are there stories you've heard? When you think about 75 years of World War II at the beginning in this country, what does that mean to you?
Well, look, I think there are so many different battles and so many different stories. I mean, I think I'm always taken by the Rats of Tobruk and the stories that came out of them. They were just so tenacious. And I think that fighting spirit of the Australians, of the Anzacs, that we've seen over such a long period of time, but also I think that sense of real service to country, that sense that, so many men and women put their lives on the line, so many people were prepared to take up that call to defend the country and to fight tyranny. So I think it is just an outstanding example to us of self-sacrifice. That would be the thing that defines it for me.
Yeah, I'd agree, Kelvin Thomson. I mean, it is something about that generation, apart from conscription, apart from the physical service, everything from the women who ended up being part of the land army, the way the nation had to pull together. You've been an MP for a long time, you've been to plenty of Anzac Day services. When you've been able to meet and talk to those World War II people, what connection do they make for you?
Yeah, well, they are a remarkable group of people, and they do epitomise the Australian spirit in so many ways. My father's brother John, and John is my middle name in his honour, flew as an airman at the age of 21 and was shot down by the Japanese and strafed and survived that in the water. and then on his next flight was killed. And you know, when I was young, he seemed like, as a 21-year-old, he seemed older, and now I look back, of course, and to think he was so young, and so many of them who went to war and who died in our cause and in a just cause, they were very young, and that's the thing that strikes me now.
Paul, can I just add one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Recently I had the opportunity to go up to RAF Darwin for a few days and spend some time with some of our military personnel there, and can I say that there's no doubt that the World War II generation was amazing, and it was a much bigger cohort obviously, but our men and women in uniform at the moment absolutely do us proud, and I'm sure whatever they may be asked to do in Iraq in coming weeks and months, they will serve us with great distinction.
All right, I agree. Unity ticket at the end of that one too. Thank you, gents. We'll see you again very soon from Canberra. All the best. Now we'll continue on with our conversation with Michael Kroger and Adam Creighton in a second, including Adam has got some great stats that won't shock you if you work in an office block, but the amount of consultants that companies are hiring is unbelievable. Some of the biggest countries in the world, well, they're in our wake as basically our bosses put off being bosses and get other people to do it. More in a sec.